The Summoner's Curse. A group of friends had been playing League of Legends together for years. Every evening, they would log on, queue up, and dive into the familiar chaos of Summoner's Rift. They knew every champion, every strategy, and every nuance of the game. But one night, something was different. They were deep into a ranked match, tensions running high as they battled for victory. Suddenly, a new message appeared in the team chat from a player none of them had seen before. The username was just a string of garbled symbols, and the message was a simple question: do you want to win? They brushed it off as just a troll, but as the match went on, strange things started happening. Their opponents, who had been dominating the game, began to make inexplicable mistakes. Towers fell one after another, and their once unbeatable enemies suddenly seemed weak and clumsy. Victory was within reach, but the feeling was unsettling. Then, just as they were about to destroy the Nexus, the garbled username popped up again. "A deal is a deal," it said. And before anyone could react, their screens flickered and the match abruptly ended, with the victory screen flashing in eerie silence. Confused, they tried to laugh it off, but something felt wrong. Their screens didn't return to the normal lobby. Instead, they were shown a strange new map, one they'd never seen before. The graphics were outdated, pixelated, and the colors were muted. Almost as if the game was decades old, a single line of text appeared on the screen: "One more game." They tried to exit the client, but nothing worked. Their mice and keyboards were unresponsive, and even unplugging the computers had no effect. They were trapped, forced to pick their champions and start this mysterious match. The map was a twisted version of Summoner's Rift. The jungle was overgrown with sickly trees. The river was filled with dark, stagnant water, and the once vibrant lanes were cracked and crumbling. Worse still, the champions they had chosen now looked grotesque, twisted, and had distorted versions of their familiar forms. Their skins seemed to writhe, as if something was trapped beneath the surface. As the game began, they quickly realized they weren't fighting against AI or other players. Their opponents were their own champions, controlled by an unseen force that knew every move they would make. The game became a horrifying battle against themselves, their characters moving with a mind of their own, attacking them with a ruthless efficiency they couldn't match. One by one, they fell, their champions slain in the most gruesome ways imaginable. But instead of respawning, their screens filled with a blinding white light and a deafening, distorted sound that made their ears ring and their heads ache. When the light faded, they found themselves back in their own bodies. But everything felt wrong. Their rooms were dark, the air thick with an oppressive silence. They tried to speak to each other through the voice chat, but all that came out were the same garbled symbols they had seen before. As they looked around, they realized with growing horror that they were no longer in their homes. The walls of their rooms were now the same sickly, twisted landscape from the game. The windows were black voids, and the doors were sealed shut. They were trapped in a nightmarish version of Summoner's Rift, their bodies and minds bound to the cursed map. And then the final message appeared on their screens, typed in blood-red letters: "You are the champions now." Forever stuck in the game, they were forced to play again and again, their every move controlled by the cursed code that had ensnared them. They could hear each other's screams echoing through the twisted landscape, but they could do nothing to stop it. The game had taken them, and there was no escape. Every night, when other players queued up, they became the opponents. The twisted, malevolent champions hunting the rift, desperate for someone to take their place. But no one ever did. The last match. In the dim glow of a flickering monitor, Jamie adjusted his headset, the Overwatch logo spinning on the screen. It was another late night, and the squad was ready for yet another grind. Overwatch had been their game for years, a familiar comfort in the chaos of real life. But something had been off lately. It started with a rumor, whispered in gaming forums and on Discord servers. People said there was a match you could get into late at night, around 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour of the internet. This match, once joined, could never be left. The rumor was ridiculous, of course, just creepypasta nonsense designed to scare kids. Except the first person who posted the rumor had never logged into their account again, and neither had the second. "Ready up, Jamie." Ben's voice crackled through the headset, bringing him back to the moment. "Yeah, I'm here." He clicked the ready button and felt the familiar rush as the match began. Kings Row, a classic map. Jamie knew every corner, every angle, and every flank route. But tonight, the map looked different. The shadows seemed deeper, and the streetlights flickered unnervingly. "Anyone else seeing this?" Jamie asked. "Seeing what?" asked Alice, the healer. "The map. It's darker than usual. Something feels wrong." "Nah, man," Ben replied. "You're just tired. Let's focus. We need to win this one." The match began normally. Jamie's Soldier 76 tore through the enemy team with precise bursts of gunfire, while Alice kept them healed. And Ben's Reinhardt shielded them from danger. They had played together so many times that their coordination was flawless. But then, things started to go wrong. Jamie noticed it first. An enemy Genji was acting strange. Instead of rushing the back line or trying to slice through them, he just stood there, staring at them from a distance, his mask glowing eerily. No emotes, no sprays, nothing. He was just staring. Guys, that Genji's really creeping me out," Jamie muttered. "Ignore him," Ben barked. "It's just a glitch. We're pushing." As they moved forward, more enemies stopped playing. A Zenyatta hovered in the air, motionless. A Pharah floated high above, not firing a single rocket. They were all just watching. Then came the whispers. At first, Jamie thought it was background noise or his headset acting up, but the voices grew louder. They were words impossible to make out, but they were filled with a malice, eerie intent. He wasn't alone in hearing it. "Turn off the comms!" Alice screamed suddenly. Her voice panicked. "Turn them off, now!" Jamie ripped his headset off, but the whispers didn't stop. They slithered into his ears, echoing from his speakers, his phone, and even from the walls of his room. And then the screen changed. The game froze for a second, and then all the lights on Kings Row went out. The only source of light was a pale, unnatural glow from the eyes of the enemy team. They were all staring now, their bodies twitching unnervingly, their movements no longer smooth or human. "We need to leave," Jamie shouted. His hands moved to exit the game, but the option wasn't there. In fact, the entire menu was gone. He pressed Alt plus F4, but nothing. He yanked at his computer power cable, but the screen stayed on. "We can't get out." Alice's voice quivered. "It's the match. This is the one they were talking about." "I don't believe in that crap," Ben yelled. "It's just a bug. We'll ride it out." But Jamie knew better. He looked at the player icons on his screen. The names of his teammates were flickering, and one by one, they changed to unfamiliar names, except his. Suddenly, the enemy Genji charged forward, moving faster than any character should. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Jamie's Soldier 76, staring through the screen. The eyes on Genji's mask glowed brighter, almost as if they were looking right into Jamie's soul. Then, with a single slash of his dragon blade, the screen went black. Jamie's heart raced. His computer rebooted on its own. But the login screen wasn't for Windows. It was Overwatch, and the only option was reconnect. Jamie? Alice's voice came through the headset again. Ben's gone. He's not in the call anymore. I can't leave either, Jamie replied, his voice hollow. Without thinking, his hand moved the mouse and clicked reconnect. The screen flashed, and he was back in the game, but this time, it wasn't King's Row. It was an empty, void-like space, just blackness stretching infinitely in every direction. And there they were, the enemy team, along with the missing players from the forums, all staring with lifeless eyes, their gamer tags flashing like static. Before Jamie could even move, his Soldier 76 fell to the ground. A death screen appeared, but there was no respawn timer, just one message in bold letters. Welcome to the last match. The whispers grew louder, and suddenly Jamie felt a chill in his room, as if something was watching him from behind. Slowly, he turned around, but all he saw was darkness, and then silence. Jamie's account was never logged into again, and his friends, no one ever heard from them either. The rumor spread further, of course. Some dismissed it as a glitch, others as a myth. But if you play Overwatch at 3 a.m., you might just get invited to the last match, and once you're in, there's no way out. Lethal Company. The job posting looked simple enough. Night shift worker needed for Lethal Company. No prior experience required. For Jake, who was desperate for money, it seemed like a golden opportunity. He figured it was just another corporate warehouse job, something mundane where the worst he'd face would be a temperamental boss or long hours. But something about the place felt off from the moment he arrived. The building stood at the edge of town, far from anything that resembled life. Its windows were dark, save for a single flickering light over the door. The structure was massive, stretching high into the sky like an abandoned monument. It reeked of decay, as though the walls themselves were rotting from within. Jake stepped inside, greeted only by a cool draft and the faint hum of electricity. The interior was equally as bleak, aisles of dusty, towering shelves that seemed to go on forever, filled with forgotten inventory, some dating back decades. It was unsettlingly quiet, the kind of silence that made you feel watched. A man in a tattered uniform approached him, introducing himself as Steve, the shift supervisor. His eyes were sunken, his face pallid, but his smile was warm. Too warm. Steve handed Jake a flashlight and told him his task was simple. Patrol the warehouse, make sure no one was tampering with the goods, and report anything unusual. Just be careful in the restricted areas, Steve warned with a chuckle. Some places here can get weird. Jake shrugged it off, assuming Steve was just messing with the new guy. But as his shift began, it quickly became clear that something was very wrong. As Jake made his rounds, his flashlight flickered, barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. Every step he took echoed unnaturally, like the sound was trapped and bouncing back from places it shouldn't. The shelves seemed to shift and warp as he passed them, as if they were alive and trying to corner him. Then came the noises. At first, faint scratching sounds like nails scraping across metal. Then the whispers, low and unintelligible, but undeniably human. They followed him, growing louder the deeper he ventured into the warehouse. Curiosity got the better of him, and against Steve's warning, Jake wandered into one of the restricted areas. There, the shelves were different. The cages were lined to the walls, some still filled with what looked like mechanical parts, while others contained things. The shapes were misshapen, barely visible in the dim light, but they squirmed unnaturally, as though they were trying to escape their bindings. Suddenly, his flashlight died completely, plunging him into pitch blackness. In the silence, Jake heard the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing right behind him. He turned, fumbling to get his flashlight working, but when it clicked back on, there was nothing, just empty aisles stretching endlessly in every direction. Panicked, he tried to retrace his steps, but the warehouse had changed. No matter where he turned, he ended up back in the same spot, surrounded by those cages. The whispers were growing louder, now intelligible.
They shouldn't have come back. We shouldn't be here.
Jake's heart raced. He grabbed his radio, calling out to Steve, but there was no response, only static. The walls seemed to close in, the aisles narrowing as if the building itself was alive and trying to trap him. The scratching sounds returned, now more aggressive, as if something was trying to claw its way out of the cages. Then, without warning, one of the cages broke open. A figure, half mechanical, half human, staggered out, its body a grotesque amalgamation of rusted metal and decaying flesh. It moaned, a sound filled with both agony and rage, before charging at Jake. He ran, weaving through the aisles, but no matter how far he ran, the warehouse kept shifting and twisting. His heart pounded in his chest as more creatures emerged from the shadows, each more twisted than the last, all once human, now prisoners of whatever dark force controlled this place. Jake realized too late what Lethal Company truly was. It wasn't a warehouse. It was a graveyard, a place where the dead were kept, experimented on, and transformed into monstrous creatures. And now he was trapped with them. In his final moments, Jake could hear Steve's voice over the radio, calm and collected. "Welcome to Lethal Company. We're always hiring, and no one ever leaves." The last thing Jake saw before the creatures descended upon him was the flickering light above the door, his only way out, just out of reach, fading into darkness. The next day, another ad appeared online. Night shift worker needed for Lethal Company. No prior experience required.